Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all doing good and obviously staying safe in quarantine. Wash your damn hands, stay indoors, be safe. I sound like such a mom. It's this haircut. I gave myself a Karen haircut. I cut off 4 inches. And now I want to share Minion memes unironically on Facebook. This is giving me too much power. If you're new to my channel and you've never seen my face before, hello, I'm Yasmin. I'm 21 from the UK. I'm a journalist. I'm also a big time emo. In case you couldn't tell by the that. And this isn't my typical setup. Usually I would actually be sat right over here with my lovely tapestry and I would be using my softboxes and my Canon 60D, but I broke it and now it's in repairs and I'm £800 in debt. I'm also ill, so I don't want to put any makeup on. It's been a not a good few days. Now this video is already very long in itself, so I don't want to take up too much of your time because I could sit here and talk all day, but I do want to give a background and a context to what I'm talking about, because if I've learned anything about the alternative music scene in the past few weeks, it's that there are some people who don't realise that diversity is an issue in this scene and that there is not enough representation of people of colour. And it's honestly very worrying. By now, I'm sure you're all aware, and I would hope you've all been using your platforms to speak out against the unlawful, unjust murder of George Floyd, the protests in retaliation to that, and the uprising of the BLM movement, and how the BLM movement and protesters have been treated by police, by the media, and just generally because Twitter has educated us so much in the past 2 weeks, more than my school and the education system ever did, about the systemic racism and oppression that Black people and people of colour in general in America and the UK face. Because every day, Black people in the US are belittled, degraded and dehumanized by the police force, by the government, by society, because racism is so deeply ingrained in our society. It pockets itself into every aspect, like the beauty industry, the educational system, the music industry, for example. And that's not me trying to patronize you like, wow, racism exists, guys. I'm so woke, because racism has existed a lot longer than I've been alive. This has been going on for centuries. And someone on Twitter summarized it perfectly when they said this was very much the straw that broke the camel's back. Because my dad can recount like really extreme racist experiences in his lifetime, because he's 61 now. And when he came here from India when he was 7, he used to get chased home by all the kids in his school because he was the only brown kid and they would throw stones at him and call him a dirty packy. And those people are still alive. So yeah. But I think because racism is so deeply ingrained in our society for centuries, there are a few things that are racist that have just kind of been normalized and we haven't really realized it's a problem until now. For example, in the alternative music industry that I work in, there aren't many people of colour working in that. And it's not anything the alternative music industry is doing, because I'd argue in more recent years, alternative music, which is like an umbrella term for rock, metal, punk, and all the subgenres in that, I would argue that the media companies behind that, the record labels behind that, the PR companies, and everybody working in the industry has made an effort to be more inclusive, and there are more people coming into the scene that are people of colour. But I think because inherently rock was appropriated from Black people and it's always been considered a white people thing, the idea of like liking rock or metal or being goth or emo has always been considered a white people thing. Usually when I do these videos, I try to find statistics on this stuff to back up what I'm saying so I don't seem like a blabbering idiot, but there are no statistics, or there's very little like generalized statistics for what I'm talking about, because the alternative music genre in itself is such a niche space. Like, it's a niche of music, and then in terms of like the media industry, it's a niche of the media industry. So there really isn't any solid statistics on people of color within this industry, people of color going to concerts and festivals in this genre. All I can really offer you are generalized statistics, and the statistics I have are from The Guardian in 2016, who said that British journalism is 94% white and 55% male. And then in the recent CNN article, hold on, said that in America, roughly 21.9% of salaried employees reported by all newsrooms were people of colour, but that doesn't account for whether they were freelancers or not. And just generally, those statistics about people coming into the media industry, it's kind of worrying as someone working in it. I was inspired by the recent events going on right now, especially the whole blackout movement, which happened 2 weeks ago. I'm sure you would have seen it was all the black squares on your Instagram. Some people actually don't know this, but that was actually created by 2 black women, Brianna and Jamila, who work in the music industry and wanted to give the music industry a day to take a step back, reflect, educate, and see if they were actually doing enough for Black creatives, for Black people in their team, if they had enough inclusivity, across the board, from boardroom to boulevard, as they said. I can only really speak from experience because clearly there isn't enough statistics on this stuff, so we have to kind of listen to the voices of people in this industry. And I definitely have a privilege being half Asian and being light-skinned, but I have experienced racism in this industry. I have been the diversity checkbox in a lot of places that I've worked, because I'm a queer woman of colour, and I have been the only brown person in a room of 7,000 people, and it is very uncomfortable. And I think being a minority is such a unique experience. It's something that, like, you can understand. I do implore white people to do their research and speak to us and understand our stories, but at the same time, there is an aspect of it that is so personal and different in itself. And being half Asian and Asian is very different to being Black, and those experiences in themselves, we do have a shared understanding of racism, but it's to different degrees because of colorism and because of oppressions put towards Black people and Asian people that are very different in themselves. But inspired by the statements made on Blackout Tuesday by the industry overall, I started to think, okay, cool, so we're going to make changes, we're going to try and like incorporate, you know, more people of colour and diversity in this industry. Cool. But how? Because if I can't even find resources about this particular genre and the people of colour within it, and then also if statistically there are going to be more white people from newsrooms to boardrooms, this sounds a bit gatekeepy, but are they gonna get it? That does sound really gatekeepy, and for the most part, white people and non-Black people in general can research about their privilege and understand the oppressions that Black people face outside and inside of this genre. But I think actually going through that gives you a very unique and personal experience that is different for everybody. And I think if we're going to have this conversation about diversity and representation in this industry for Black people, you need to speak to Black people. Over the past week, I've been speaking to Black creatives across the alternative music industry, from photographers to journalists to fans to producers to musicians, to just anybody who would speak to me about representation and diversity in this industry, why it's so important and how it shapes you and your relationship with music and the experience you have, the Black experience in alternative music, which is so incredibly different. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers and I know everything and I'm like the messiah, because I've just joined this industry. I have no idea what I'm on about. But I do think if we are going to start this conversation, which I definitely think we should, we need to start speaking to Black people in alternative music and understanding their experience and understanding how we can help them, how we can help this, make this space more inclusive. Also, so I know I've been blabbering on and I know my background is getting dark, the sun is going down. So I just wanted to say, me and my friend Scene Facts have made a full-on playlist of people of colour in the scene right now, predominantly Black artists in the scene right now that are absolutely killing it. So if you want to find new artists, it ranges everything from like pop to pop punk to metalcore to metal to hardcore to just everything. That will be in the description. A few artists in this video are actually featured in that playlist. Also, I won't be making any money from this video. I will be donating it. Basically, I don't really make YouTube money anymore, which is fine because I'm not really relevant on here. But usually you have to make £60 on Google AdSense to take it out. So I probably won't make that from this video because usually I get like 500 to 1,000 views. So what I'll do instead is I'll just equate however many views I get and then donate that out of my own bank account, like whatever it equates to from Google AdSense to actual money. But I don't know where to donate because a lot of the places I've been donating have already exceeded their funds and are telling people to donate elsewhere. So if anybody can recommend somewhere that I should donate, let me know down below and I will put it on my Twitter and my Instagram once I've donated. Okay, so great starting off point, because it really sets the tone and understanding for white people who might not understand to the fullest extent what it's like to be a person of colour in this industry. It's a simple question, but I feel like it speaks for itself. When was the first time you ever saw yourself represented in the alternative rock, metal, punk music industry? That can be on stage or off stage.
Not very often.
That's a difficult one. Like, personally, I don't think I ever have.
To be honest, I've not seen any like Black women that often in alternative music. I think the first time that I saw anybody even remotely similar was when I was about 15, 16 and I started listening to Skindred.
The first time I felt represented when I discovered Skindred, I fucking loved that band. And I think that was the main time I felt represented because it wasn't just a Black guy at the front of the band. Like, they actually included the culture into the music.
So I went to a show in New York that was, I think, Enter Shikari, Let Live, a band called At the Skylines, and somebody else. I was a big Enter Shikari fan at the time, but I had only listened to a little bit of Let Live. They started playing, and Jason, their singer, came out, and I immediately was like, wait, that guy looks like me. That's cool. Like in it, because he specifically looks similar to me too, I think it helped. But he was the first kind of mixed race, like straight up acted black kind of dude who I'd seen fronting one of these bands at these shows that I've been to. And I hadn't realized until that moment that it was something that I had taken note of.
I think one of the first times I felt represented was when the Fever 333 was on the cover of Kerrang in, I want to say, May or June 2018. I was obviously so for what they were doing, and they only had a couple of songs out. Things like Burn It and Made It in America were out, and I latched on immediately.
I mean, it depends on kind of where you start, because I want to say, well, at least both of us, grew up, our musical beginnings grew up in like hip hop and R&B. So us seeing someone that looked like us was pretty immediate coming from that genre.
I know at least one of the first bands, I think, in like our genre that I latched onto was Let Live, for sure. Mm-hmm. Jason Butler is a king, and he is one of the best people I've ever seen, like morally, talent-wise, just he's a great human being.
For me, like really early, Skunk Anansie, so Skin from Skunk Anansie was like the first black person, it's a black woman as well, which is amazing. But it was awesome. Like I was always wanting to do like stuff to do with alternative rock music when I was a kid, but growing up in like Hackney and just like that just wasn't the norm.
With Rage Against the Machine, they are just amazing to me. I could have saw them at Downer this year. I couldn't. My life's all over. I'm absolutely heartbroken. I want to cry. But that is the only band what I other than that, I haven't saw a band live which I could have saw and been like, oh, that could be me.
Probably the first time I saw myself represented it and this like genre of music probably was like Gym Class Heroes, Travie McCoy. Like that was like probably my first person I looked at, and I was like, oh, like he kind of looked like me, so that's why I like really mess with Gym Class Heroes.
Jada Pinkett Smith was in a band for a while.
Oh yeah,
for a while, but
that's
I wasn't.
True.
That was so not like my time, so I don't.
And
really
she
know.
wasn't in like she had her own pop punk band, but she wasn't in the scene.
Yeah.
So like, especially like in our scene, we don't see anyone who looks like us. Like the closest like representation we have is just women in general, but specifically like women of color who play the type of music that we do. We don't see that like at all. And if there's people out there, I would love to like find out about them, but I don't know. It just, if they do exist, it gets buried under everything just like we did for so long. And this might not.
Now, obviously, we're having this conversation right now because of the recent events that have unfolded in America, the tragic death of George Floyd, and the ongoing deaths of Black men and women in the US and the UK at the hands of police brutality and systemic racism and oppression. I feel like this is only being, solved and like dealt with now because we finally have a platform on social media to connect with one another and educate one another, and we finally have a platform for our voice where we can all band together, and a lot of bands have been engaging with that conversation and using their platforms to speak up about this, but some haven't. And there's been this conflict in the scene with bands who haven't spoke out or took a while to speak out and only did when their fans called them out. Do you think it is the responsibility of artists in a scene that is inherently very punk and represents punk values of anti-discrimination, anti-fascism, equality for all? Do you think it is the responsibility of artists monetizing on the punk scene and the punk values to speak out about this stuff?
I've been literally arguing about this on Twitter today. Literally this topic.
I think it is important, definitely, because like you said, with alternative music, that anti-fascism is like a core part of that. So I think, to me, seeing the bands that aren't mentioning it at all kind of just, I hate to say it, but it kind of makes them seem like posers kind of thing.
There is such a fine line between dutiful activism and obligated activism. I do feel like there is a subset of people that post, again, for the genuineness of their audience needing to hear it, and then there's some that do it out of obligation. And we're kind of right now specifically in that throng where a lot of people are kind of having to decide to post for obligated reasons. It's very interesting. It makes me feel conflicted personally.
You can be a part of the I need to do this to look good like factor, which is a thing and it happens. And I'm not going to get mad at you for it, because at the end of the day, everybody's a brand and they want to look good. But it's morally kind of like, eh. So, but I think these bands that have members of color should want to do it for themselves. Like, and it's not necessarily my place to make them do it. It's just, it's odd to me when a band doesn't want to use their platform to do some greater good for something that affects someone in that band.
Like, I've had this conversation too with some other people as well. It's like, for these bands that haven't said anything, I'm not going to necessarily be out here and be like, oh, I will never listen to them again. They're canceled. They're like scum of the earth. But I am also going to just be like, maybe y'all aren't as like cool as people as I thought, you know? And it's just like, for me at least, like he was saying, I just find it odd not to speak up, because it doesn't really, at least in my opinion, I don't think it can come off as a negative.
Yeah.
The only possible negative you could possibly accrue from it is if you have some people that are like against it or that are racist in your fan base that are going to be like, oh, I'll never listen to you again because you're supporting this. And it's kind of just like, well, why do you want them there in the first place?
There has strangely been a lot of kick up from the scene. I know that Planet Rock got a lot of abuse on their Facebook post for The Show Must Be Paused, you know, the blackout trend. They did that and they got a lot of abuse. And then Nook Loose in particular have been getting a lot of backlash on their Facebook from fans, which I find very shocking, because usually I am open to other people's opinions, and if people don't agree with this stuff, I can understand. But when you're in a community that is inherently, like, at its core, punk, political, and has a specific view, it just seems a bit conflicting, you know, to be bopping around the club to Rage Against the Machine, but then draw the line about talking about this stuff. And especially in recent years, when the scene is so political, with the likes of Fever 333, Stray from the Path, Architects, constantly speaking about this stuff, can you really separate the art from the artist when the art itself is inherently political?
First of all, I think that saying that all this is adding politics into music is bullshit. Plain and simple. I think that saying people losing their lives or people having equality full stop is politics, is white privilege within itself.
It really annoys me when people say, oh, I don't get involved with politics. It's a humanitarian issue. It's not political. You cannot have an opinion on racism because it's not political at all. It's humanitarian.
When you're a band and it's literally your, you know, entire being to make this art, and especially if it's coming from you, there is no real like separation. That is what the art is. That is who you are.
To even be able to think of it in that way, like, that is a privilege I wish I could have, but we don't. That's what we're advocating for, you know. And music, especially rock and metal and alternative, is a catalyst or an avenue for feeling something, for expressing frustrations. So whether it's frustrations with your hometown, frustrations with that girl who broke up with you, frustrations with your job, or frustrations with systemic racism.
I don't think there's as big of a separation as people may think. And a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I want to stay out of politics. You know, I don't want to get involved. But this is more than just politics. This is human rights we're talking about. And that's like, it's just so beyond politics, and it's long overdue for people to actually speak up about it and like realize that it's not just a difference of opinion, it's about morals.
Especially an artist that's a lot bigger, I'm sure there's fans that just like their sound and like try to ignore the fact that they're talking about these issues and just listen to the sound, but you really can't do that. They're all connected, you know what I mean? If you have different views in a band that's talking about, it's kind of weird, like, then how can you support them, you know?
Punk in particular was almost founded off of the idea of, like, politics. And that's kind of why, like, I feel like it just, like, this is a little off topic, but the idea about how I don't understand why there are, like, white supremacists and, like, all of these people who are racist and, like homophobic, all these people who are in the punk community, because that's not what punk is about.
Yeah, no, not really. You can't, like, because at the end of the day, like, some of these bands have black artists in them. You choosing to be silent, it's like I gotta ask the question why. Like, why are you choosing to be silent on this subject? Because you're not silent on every subject. So I always tell people, like, I'm in the business of making people feel bad, just because, like, not on purpose, but like I ask you questions. I want you to say it out loud so you can notice and see how it sounds coming out your mouth. You know, when you're like, man, that actually does sound bad when you say it out loud. Like, yeah, because you're not speaking up on these certain issues. You have to, or whatever. You have to ask yourself, why am I not speaking up about these issues? Is it because I have some underlying, like, you know, prejudices, or I'm just kind of not acknowledging my white privilege? Like, why am I not speaking up? So
I think when we have this conversation about representation, it's very interesting because a lot of people who might not understand this industry and its history, you know, might say that, oh yeah, but it's always been a white people thing. Like Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll, which is a flat out lie. The king of rock and roll was not Elvis Presley. I think white people just got attributed for rock and roll, but they weren't. Black people have been innovators of rock music from the earliest trailblazers like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Bo Diddley, Bessie Smith. And then you got more obvious examples like Little Richard, Jimi Hendrix, Prince. Even in more niche subgenres like punk in itself, you know, that was innovated by Black people before the Ramones and before the Sex Pistols. You had the likes of Pure Hell, Death, Bad Brains, Polly Styrene, one of the first Black women in punk music. And yet in recent years, the scene doesn't really reflect that. And some would say it's become culturally appropriated. I wondered if you thought that this scene was whitewashed, if it is whitewashed, and why? Like, why is it got like this?
If you look at the history of the world,
Yeah.
white people have a habit of stealing things from minorities. So it's like no different in music, you know, like people of color are the innovators, and then, you know, the colonizers take the credit for it. And then they're the ones who get put on the pedestal. It's just history in a different form. And it happens all the time.
Yeah, I feel like it is so inbuilt within it, or within us as people anyway, just in general and in society. Like, it's almost become the norm. Like, you just, like, almost, like, for me anyway, just you just accept it. And then obviously, like, there's been no change. Yeah, it's just strange that the way things are built, it's just built in that way. It's like taking the culture but not actually having the people behind it. Like, as in, like, you want the culture, but you don't really want the Black person or the people behind it.
Partly I think it's down to stereotypes. I've found that being a Black person who listens to alternative music, it's kind of not expected, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of people assume that hip-hop, R&B, that's Black music. It's rock, alternative metal, that's white music. And it goes down to representation. If you don't see these people performing and you don't see them that often, you're not going to make that connection.
I definitely think it's the representation, because even both sides, because if you're obviously if you're Black and listen to that kind of music and dress that way, a lot of Black people pick on it and they're like, oh, why you listen to that white stuff, or like that like white shit and stuff. And obviously Dolls Killer are a very, very good example of how they portray this whole, like, they literally had a top that says goth is white. So how do you expect us to feel accepted in an industry where you're like, Black people, like, they basically say like Black people aren't allowed, like it's a white thing, you can't be here.
I remember I visited Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a couple years ago, and there is a section for Black musicians, like way, like forever ago, like even like in the slave days and like before that. And then I came up to this Elvis Presley part, and it just called him out. It was like, Elvis Presley stole this song from this Black woman.
Another thing about representation is how it finds itself in the industry and how we carry that forward. So a big talking point this year was about festival lineups. Obviously, they didn't happen because of coronavirus and whatnot. But earlier this year, a few festivals got into hot water. I know my friends Naomi Sanders and Lucy McCourt, they were speaking about this actively, about the lack of women on festival lineups and the lack of people of colour and queer people on some of the biggest festival lineups in the world, and that, you know, they did have women and they did have people of colour, but they were often tokenized. So I wanted to get your perspective on why representation on specifically stuff like festival lineups is really important, and whether that ever blurs the lines of tokenism.
Firstly, I think it is really important to have that representation. I think just as future generations, in terms of seeing people that look like them and are from the same areas, from the same backgrounds, they feel like they can do it. And I think that's really important in terms of the future of the music industry. But that is a good question about tokenism, is that it is a really fine line between just having them on there because they're black. But then when it is people like Stormzy, he is so big in the UK right now, I kind of don't think, I don't know, it is a tricky one. Yeah. I feel like it's a good start to have more black people and people of colour on there, but I think you have to take into consideration why people are adding them onto the lineup, if that makes sense. And if they're doing it to try and promote these voices, and that's great, but if they're doing it to try and just meet a quota or so people on Twitter won't complain about it, then that's the issue.
Okay, so within festivals anyway, I think there's been I think it's 2003 is really, really good for setting the bar with putting more alternative bands, and obviously more women, more people of color along their lineups. It's been that's the only festival I kind of seen kind of approach that and do something about it actively anyway. For me growing up, I didn't see any the only bands that I can literally list off well, a band called Seven Dust. This is years and years and years ago. Skindred, so Benji from Skindred was one of the first black people that I ever saw on the stage. And then it was more indie stuff, so you had Kelly from Block Party, which for me is another thing. I literally used to get called him all the time, and it used to frustrate me so much. But but that's what I mean. There wasn't many people. So it's so important that there is people of color just within it, and not because they are of color. It should, I think, people, again, it should be on merit. If someone's really good, we should be holding them up high and pushing them, but just not putting them there because it's because there isn't enough representation. I feel like that's a cop out. I feel like people need to be doing their best to uplift.
I've told people, I'm not saying just go and grab black artists and creatives just to say you did it, but actually go grab them for talent. But at the end of the day, a lot of us are talented. It's not like we just out here just doing it, It started with us, and then so a lot of us have honed this music and honed what we represent. So I think it's super important for inclusivity when it comes to festivals and stuff like that, because I want to go to a festival and I want to feel comfortable. I want to see some other black people there. When I tell people all the time, I'm used to touring and going in a venue and just looking around for at least one black person in the room, and then when I see one black person in the room, we both kind of just look and we both kind of nod, and it's okay, now I feel a little comfortable. Now I can take a breath for a second, because it's people don't understand how rare it is to see us in these spaces. And not that we don't consume the music, because we love all the music. It's just that I don't want to go to these concerts, because if I walk in the door, I've had people turn to look at me what are you doing here? Or even on tour with full all access credentials, and they kind of you're with the band, what are you doing here type thing. So it's really crucial with representing people in these areas, because we have to feel comfortable.
touching back on bands speaking out about this, I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. So it was either last year or the year before, can't place a date on it, but in the past few years, Joel Birch from the Amity Affliction got into some hot water when he kicked out a Trump supporter from one of his shows, and he called them out from the crowd because I think they were wearing a MAGA cap, so they were actively expressing their views through their personal appearance, and you know, that in itself could be seen as provoking. Now, do you think people who have those opposing views have a place in our shows, not because they have those views, more so because if Trump, for example, is declaring an anti-fascist organization a terrorist group, by logical definition, I'm not saying this, that it's my personal opinion, but by logical definition, that would make him a fascist. And that conflicts with a lot of the music in this scene. So do you really think people who agree with those views have a place in a scene that doesn't agree and actively speaks out against those views?
It's funny because I was actually on that tour and I was at that show, yeah, when it happened, when we were in Vegas, and I kind of like heard the commotion. I came out the green room and like to see what was going on, but like I'll say it like this: like I'm a totally inclusive person. Like I talk to people with different views about me all the time. I feel like it's good to talk to people that don't think like you so you can learn new things. With that being said, though, people have to understand when you come to a punk show, you come to a rock show that represents something that you are basically supporting somebody that totally does not believe in all that stuff. It's gonna, you know, incite some type of like fear, you feel me? Like you're wearing that knowing what you're doing, you know, because you think about it before you leave the house. You like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go wear my Make America Great Again hat. I don't necessarily think we need to like beat up Trump supporters or like, you know, demonize those people, but you have some people that are truly misguided. Like I've had people that like support Trump not because of what comes out of his mouth, but because of what he's done for the economy and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, I get that, but we also can't deny, you know, what he's done outside of that, like him being blatantly racist and like him doing stuff like that.
I think that it's somewhere in between, and that's a very interesting question, the way that you phrased it specifically. It's definitely somewhere in between. I think that those, if you're in a punk environment, let's say a punk show, right? The purpose of that show most likely is a leftist one by default, you know, whether it's explicit or not. So if you're there as a right person, a right-winged person, I think, I hesitate to use the word right, but I think that it is within the right of the audience there to silence you in that specific space, because that space is designated for other people that are not you. But I don't think that they shouldn't be allowed there. They should be allowed to be there and exist and in fact witness what they would be allowed to be a part of and not marginalized from if they decided to, you know, actually care about other fucking people. So
it's like, I'm sorry, you know, you want to be fair or whatever, but no, it's like if you're right wing and you're just not, well, no, actually, let me take that back. Not right wing, not strictly right wing. If you are socially right wing, then you can't be there. Fiscally, I don't care. You know, policy wise, whatever. You know, if you think that the country needs to be run with this, that, and the third, you know, this small government, big government, I don't care about that. But if you're a person that's just like, oh, I'm not down with LGBT, then you can't be there. You just can't be there. If you support Trump, you can't be there. I'm sorry. You just cannot. And I do think it is basis by basis. There are right-wing punk bands. I do know they exist. And that's like, if they don't want us, you know, liberal thinking people to be there, that's their right to. But punk to me is inherently just progressive genre and accepting of anything that's just not trying to harm folks.
I mean, that kind of thing is hard to say only in the sense of like thinking about it objectively. Yeah. But it's hard to think about, you know, something socially, especially something that's very personal. Or because yeah, it's just like, yeah, it's for me, fuck Trump, everything he stands for. So it's just like if you have someone at a show that's trying to spout that, I'm gonna be like, all right, fuck you too, and I don't want you there personally. And I guess that just kind of is like he said, a base by base kind of thing, especially if they're being very outward about it.
Personally, wouldn't, if that person was just like jamming out and not bothering anyone, I personally wouldn't stop the set and kick them out. Like, as long as no one's really, he's not shouting out those things, you know what I mean? If he's just like there and just minding his own, but also wearing, but isn't saying anything, I wouldn't kick him out. But
because if you're coming to the show with an agenda to make other people feel unsafe, get out.
If you're,
you know,
like in the
that's
crowd,
okay.
just like screaming all this stuff, like all lives matter, all this crap, then obviously I'm gonna stop.
I definitely would be confused as to why he's there. I feel
Exactly.
like,
And why
there
he
was,
wore
like,
that.
Yeah, I feel like you would know, like, oh, I'm gonna wear something that I know I'm gonna get backlash for, but
Yeah.
I think it depends on how they act before we would.
Being a minority in this scene is so strange in itself. It's kind of like a shared experience because, like, if you're queer, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, at some point you have been discriminated against. So we can all relate on that level, and we all have that kind of, you know, shared experience. But being a person of color and being discriminated against because of that is very different in itself, and it varies, like, because, you know, colorism and general discriminations and oppressions put against Black people versus, for example, South Asian people, it's different and it varies. So I think being a Black person in particular in this industry is its own very unique and niche experience that white people can only comprehend to a certain extent, because you can understand what discrimination is on a base level, but it is very different to then experience it. And I think one thing that I just like is so strange to wrap your head around when you've never experienced it is being the only person of color in the room and walking into a room and you are literally the only person there of your skin color.
You're very aware. I think you're very aware of what people are saying. You're very aware of what you're saying.
This is a hard thing to explain to non-white people, or sorry, to white people.
It's like, that's not why I'm here. Just like, I am here as a fellow, like, supporter of the band. Like, I like the music. You don't have to point out that I'm mixed race. Like, it's not like a, oh my God, you're mixed race and you like this music. Like, yeah, the last time it happened when I was going to see Architects at Ali Pali, and obviously that's a huge venue. I remember walking through, and obviously there was like little tents and stuff and little stalls and whatever. And I just felt like I just did not belong at all. I just felt like I was looking around at what everyone was wearing, and I just felt like I had to, like, be wearing more, or like do my eyeshadow darker, or like just do something to kind of prove to these people that regardless if I'm an Architects fan or not, I feel like I had to look the part. And that's every single gig I've gone to. I have actually had to go out of my way to try harder to look like I belong there.
I actually suffer with anxiety due to it, like to the point where I hide in toilets because I feel so uncomfortable. Like, I go to a club and I'm the only Black person there. I'm like, oh shit, like, my anxiety is getting out. And it's not very nice to think like that, but I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of my skin colour.
You don't want to say anything that can kind of trigger something that can be offensive, especially if it's in a professional setting, because you kind of feel like you don't want to be the one to cause a scene. You don't want to be the one that is speaking out against everybody else, and it just feels very uncomfortable.
Being the only black person, you kind of, it depends on the friend group, basically. I think the support I had, I was lucky enough that I just felt like unique. I didn't feel like an odd or an outcast within it. I think when it came to going to festivals and just places where people just don't see people of color, like, that's when you're made to feel really awkward and like you shouldn't be there. That's the only time I've ever felt really uncomfortable, is just going to festivals, like, or going to, I think there was a gig, I think it was like Hatebreed, Anthrax, this was like years ago, and I just remember it was just me, and then one of my other friends was like mixed race, and then there was another Black guy in the crowd, but we were the only ones in the crowd. And then it was really uncomfortable to the point where I think there was like people doing like salutes or something. It was really off. I was like, this is off, man. And we basically just left the show.
Security will look at me when I walk up and they'll be like, "You all right, love?" I say, "Yes, I'm fine." Sometimes they'll give me a look up and down once or twice. Sometimes they'll ask me if I'm in the right place, which is always fun. Then I walk into the room. I normally go down to gigs early because I'm a nerd. Get some really fun looks from some people. It can range from I've had anything from just some looks, staring too long, and then they avert their gaze when I catch their gaze. I'll hear them mutter under their breath or whisper to their friend, even though they think I haven't heard.
I'm an anxious person anyway, and I'm always kind of like looking at my surroundings. Like, I grew up in the hood, so it's like I'm always looking at my surroundings, making sure I know where the exits are, like that type of thing. So then I'm like, okay, I'm on tour right now, and I'm in the middle of Idaho, and so I've never heard of before. And then I walk in a room, and it's a sea of white people, which is cool. Like, I don't mind, but it's like, then you get the stares, because I get it. Some people probably never been this close to a black person before. And then I'm like a tall dude. I'm like 6'2". I got dreads, as you can see. Like, I'm darker skinned, so they looking at me like, what is going on? So like, that's super uncomfortable.
People of color all grow up with this experience of knowing what it feels like to be other and to be outgroup, and to always toe that line of not, just by nature fitting into a certain situation. Yeah, there's always going to be that bond whenever you're the only person that is in the room that isn't white, and you see somebody else, because you know in that moment that at the very least you have in common that experience of both having been through enough of the same shit to be in that room together, in that exact situation together, and that's always there.
To get through some awkward things or like some bad emotions, you make jokes. I love using humor as a like coping mechanism. Yeah. So it's just like, I'll go somewhere and I'm like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna save me in a fight if it all goes down right now. Like, just because we're black and everything. But it really is just like, man, this sucks. No one here looks like me,
I even get that in the sense of other people not realizing they shouldn't take me some places.
Yeah.
And it's like, no offense to them, because they're my good friends, and I ain't gonna name no names and nothing like that. But it's just like, dog, do not take me to the South. Do not take me to some like rural type of place. Like, you need to let me know beforehand where I'm going.
First started going to shows when I was like 14. Like actually going to shows. And that's when I started getting involved in like my local scene here in Orlando, Florida. And I just remember, like, first of all, I was super young. I was younger than everyone else. So I already felt, like, kind of outcasted. But I was also the only Black woman there. I would kind of just be in the corner because I didn't feel like I belonged there. I kind of felt, like, wrong being there. But there's no reason for me to feel like that, because that's not okay.
When I started going to shows, I was actually really lucky because my best friends I've met at shows, but they're also all women of color. So in Atlanta, the scene, it is very, very diverse, and it has been for a long time now. And I didn't really feel what Taya has felt, because there's a lot of other Black people and other people of color in the room.
Like, when it comes to like personal instances, it like stems way far back, just because of like where I live and how, like, I switched schools in middle school, and I started going to this Catholic, like, all white school, and I was the only Hispanic. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was probably out of like me and like 4 other Hispanics in the entirety of this K through 12 school. So it was weird. And also the whole idea of like little, like, tiny little racist remarks that would come up, and I would be the only one in the room, so I'm not gonna like speak up and like try to say something about it because it's only me. And yeah. I also have social anxiety, so I'm going to do that. You feel better when you have people that, like, look like you and even can understand the little things that you go through when it comes to, like, family stuff or, like, anything else.
As a band, we can't even tell you how many, oh, my gosh.
When you go to shows, when we have shows, it's very evident, like, the energy in the room, it's either very standoffish with the other bands, like it has a kind of negative energy in the air, or it's so positive and inviting and amazing. It's never really anything in the middle.
Oh my gosh, one time, I will never forget this, and it hurt so much because it came from a woman. We were
Oh gosh.
we got to Loden for a festival we were playing here in Florida, and as soon as we walked in the door, this lady was like, "Oh, doors aren't open yet," and we were like, "We're a band. Like, what do you mean doors aren't open yet? We know that." And then she was like, "Oh." And it's like, why would you
No,
automatically
just
assume?
Now, when we talk about this, a lot of people don't really touch on the burden and the responsibility that comes with being a person of color, and particularly a Black person within this scene and then in the outside world and just in general, and the responsibility of education. So I wondered, is it really the responsibility of people of color, and especially Black people, to educate white people on these issues and to tell them everything they need to know when they have all the knowledge at the palm of their hands?
I think it's a mix of both. Like me as a Black man, like I'ma always speak on my struggles and like my struggles with people. Like even when I'm on tour, like speaking in different bands, like I'm like open. Like if somebody wants to ask me some questions about Black people, like by all means, if we are in the right setting, cool. Like we can sit here and have a discussion. But when it comes to like feeling like I'm obligated to educate people, that's when it comes into play, because I'm like, I'm tired. Like I can't educate the world. Like, I've had so many people hit me up since all of this stuff came up, and I appreciate everybody for hitting me up. But like you have those people that are like, what can I do? Or like, I didn't know it was this bad type thing. Or like, then that's kind of like, well, I don't know what to tell you, bro. Like we've been saying this for forever.
I find it really exhausting, to be honest, because like you said, it is easy for people to just Google things. I don't mind if people are asking like what documentaries would you recommend, or asking about my personal experience.
That's where the privilege comes in, and that's where the structural racism comes in, because some people just don't know that they are being racist. For me, it's this whole period of time has been so odd for me, because I've had people looking to me for answers.
It's one of them where it does get exhausting. It gets so exhausting, because it gets to a point where you feel like you're having to validate your present. I think people should just educate themselves. They should just know this kind of stuff, and especially when we always talk about like cultural appropriation stuff, they should like kind of research why we say those words, or what those words mean at least.
It's so easy to say, oh, it's just an article, just read that, but people are actually going to do it. And at the same time, with all the issues which has gone on, I feel like I'm being a burden when I'm actually correcting people on certain situations.
Being on Twitter and just seeing all these ignorant people, some people just don't want to be educated. They don't want to change. They don't want to learn. They don't want to become, inclusive.
A lot of them don't even have a problem with how they think. I think that's...
Yeah, and like it's not fair for Black people to have to try to convince them that we should have rights. That's not our job.
And I feel like that's why the scene needs to be more diverse. And I feel like us coming up is going to help a lot, because once we start building those relationships with these all white male bands, I feel like then they'll see firsthand and they'll learn from people that they're somewhat connected and close to. So that will help get that through their brain too.
Finally, because I've asked too many hard-hitting questions, a bit of a soft one for you. Who are some of your favorite Black alternative artists in the scene right now, whether that's people on the stage or people off the stage? Just plug your favorites. Go ahead. Tell me about them.
We've got Meet Me at the Altar, which I'm just obsessed with. Good old-fashioned sort of upbeat middle America pop punk. Then there's the band Proper. They are like really good guttural suburban emo punk. Their last album was named after a Wonder Years lyric.
Again, I'm going to say my favourite band out there in the whole entire world is Rage Against the Machine. They have been one of my favourite bands from the get-go.
Fever 333 is great. And
yeah.
Pressure Cracks is his other band.
I would say also Loathe. I remember, when they put out that record this year, I was just like, oh shit.
Yeah, it's crazy good. Like, honestly. Total, like, I hate doing this to them, but it's like I love like the Deftones-y, shoegazy feel that they got. Two other ones, they're kind of our friends, Cat Company. They're in the same area as us.
Jesus Piece, my
I
man.
have recently started listening to Loathe actually, and I think I would say them definitely.
I think he's got attention anyway. So Jason from Fever 333. Who else? That's what I mean. There aren't many. There's not really many like fronted anyway. Yeah, actually, Kadeem from Low.
I've personally been really digging a band called Proper with like a period at the end. Yeah, they're really good. I found them like through a thread that we were tagged in. And I really like their music.
I love yours truly. I love You Your Heart Out. That's like who I've been listening to a lot recently.
I've been loving Meet Me at the Altar, of course. Black creators, I love like Nicole Steffens. She's super dope photographer.
Like really admire like burlesque dancers and what's the word I'm looking for? Drag queens and stuff. As a member of the Fuel Girls, Tita Miria, she is beautiful. I love her so much. She's incredible. And she's a black woman. And I think she's absolutely insane.
I just want to say a big, massive thank you to everybody who got involved in this. Seriously, thank you so much. Thank you. I took up so much of these poor people's times. I just asked them so many questions that they didn't even need to answer, but they did. Every video was an hour long, like every interview I had, whole hour, had to edit it down. There's so much I had to cut out as well, and I was just, oh man, there's so much, but I didn't want to make this video too long. Also, I did want to talk to more people, but my problem was I had asked more people, but they said they couldn't do this week. And my issue was I thought, oh, well, people are going to stop caring in a week, which they kind of already have. Like a few people have started to move on from BLM and erased it from their feeds, which is just, so I was on a limited time constraint. But if I did want to do something like this in the future, and if people are interested in some more episodes like this, I'd be happy to speak to more people. I would love to. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I have another video, I'll probably put it there, where I spoke to Kadeem France from Loathe, and we actually talked about Black History Month and all that stuff, so you can check that out there or there. I can't remember which way it does it. But yeah, other than that, bye. Have a nice day.